green light on here. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're all doing well this afternoon. My name is Carrie Bingen. I am the Hawkeye 360 Chief Strategy Officer and really privileged to be here this afternoon and sharing the stage with this exceptional group of individuals to moderate today's discussion on equity and inclusion in the intelligence community. First, a few housekeeping items. If you have questions, please write them legibly on the index card on your chair and hold those up, and one of the Summit staff members can collect them. If you need an index card, please signal to one of the staff members. I'll pose as many audience questions as I can over the course of the discussion this afternoon. As a reminder to our speakers, our discussion is unclassified, is on the record for any press who are in attendance, and is being recorded. I know, hard for us intelligence folks to remember sometimes. And then finally, an important point about health and safety. Masks are required by Prince George's County regulation as well as by the conference venue. So please keep your masks on at all times. If you need to take a drink of water or bite a snack, please put your mask back in place right away. And thanks again for your understanding and cooperation on that. So let me start by introducing our panelists. First, we were going to be joined by Dominica Groom-Williams with Guidehouse. She's the Chief Culture, Diversity, and Inclusion Officer, but she had a family emergency, so will not be with us today. But we, again, have an exceptional group of individuals that I'm very excited to talk to. I'm going to start at the far end here. We have Marlisa Smith, is the Chief of Staff at the National Security Agency. She has served in a variety of key leadership positions at NSA, from the Chief of Security and Counterintelligence, responsible for the protection of NSA personnel, facilities, and mission capabilities worldwide, to the Director of the Equal Employment Opportunity and Diversity Office, to the Senior Representative to the FBI, leading a dedicated team to strengthen the NSA and FBI partnership, and member of the adjunct faculty teaching at the National Cryptologic School. So Marlisa really brings that holistic perspective to this panel, from that entry-level special agent to a senior leader and manager in the IC. Next to her, I have Rosanna Rogers. She is a warranted contracting officer at the NRO, where she is responsible for providing acquisition and business advisory support to a wide range of NRO enterprise contracts. She is also the chair for the NRO Hispanic Advisory Network, an employee resource group that received the IC's Equal Employment Opportunity and Diversity Professional Team Award in 2020. Rosanna has supported several major weapons programs, including the F-35, and defense entities, including at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and the Naval Research Laboratory. And then finally, to my left here, Jackie Hardy is the Deputy Division Chief of the Knowledge Management Division at the Defense Intelligence Agency. She has an extensive career in service to the nation in defense analysis, including as the Deputy Research Director for the Directorate of Analysis, Senior Intelligence Officer for Analytic Tradecraft Integration and Training in the Office of Naval Intelligence, and in multiple deployments overseas in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Kuwait, supporting our military operations, and in the Army as an Arabic translator and crypto analyst. Jackie is also the founder and co-chair of Global Equality, DAA's LGBT Employee Resource Group. So again, very privileged to have these three individuals here today. Let me just talk on scope briefly, and then I'm going to turn it over to them. You know, at its core, the intelligence community's job is to understand how others think and make decisions. We need to understand other cultures, how individuals interact, and what motivates decision-making. And the IC steals secrets, but they often only get a few pieces of the puzzle and have to assess what that puzzle is. Surrounding yourself with people that all have similar backgrounds and think like you is the quickest way to mission failure. Diversity of backgrounds, experiences, and perspectives, that strikes me as a mission imperative. So I was really taken by this panel's scope. Last year's INSA panel on diversity, equality, and inclusion focused on perspectives from senior leaders within IC agencies. This year, we wanted to examine issues from the workforce and grassroots level. How are things really going? Which is why it's so great to have employee resource group perspectives represented here. We'll explore how ERGs see progress, issues, and challenges, how actions are taken from the bottom up and top down, and contrast both public and private sector approaches. Our dialogue will encompass equity and inclusion. You know, once you're in the IC, how do we ensure that everyone has fair opportunities to excel and advance equity? And then how do we bring a wide range of voices to the table, inclusion, so that our missions and our decision makers are informed by comprehensive intelligence, wide-ranging perspectives, and assumptions that are continually challenged. So with that frame, I'd like to ask each of our panelists to share any opening thoughts. Jackie.
Good afternoon, everyone. As Carrie indicated, my name is Jackie Hardy. I work in the Analytic Development Office at DIA. After 15 years of working CT, and I'm happy to note my mentor for that entire career is sitting in the back of the room. I'm very pleased to have him here. After 15 years of trying to catch bad guys and having scary dreams when I don't, I chose to go on a joint duty assignment and build analytic tools for the Navy, where I helped design the overall process and integration of the program of analysis for Navy, and then DIA brought me back home, and I started doing that for DIA. And at the end of that rotation, I was able to start working with the folks who actually build the tools. So now I lead a team of about 200 people who build microservice tools that serve analysts in the agency. So I'm very much still an analyst. I might not write papers from day to day, but I'm on a constant effort to try and build things that build capacity. And you'd think, okay, I'll admit, in some cases, I'm even torn to go to the other AI breakout session today. But since I can't do that and do this at the same time, I haven't worked on that microservice tool yet. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about what it's like to start an ERG. In 2008, I went to my boss and I said I wanted to start an LGBT group at DIA, and he said, "Don't. Your career cannot survive it." But I've never followed the advice of adults who care about me. And so I pursued that all within the prescribed methods of actions of a middling to junior employee in an agency. I prepared a proposal for my boss, who then spent some time to try and prepare a proposal for his boss, who canceled 4 times. And eventually I was able to present that proposal, and I was put on hold for a year. In the meantime, I had, without my knowledge, there was another individual at DIA trying to do the same thing, and he had something I didn't have, and that was another job in the pocket. And so he also was one of the protocol officers at the agency, and he scheduled a room meeting for the first initial meeting of our LGBT group. Our first meeting had 3 prospective members, 2 people trying to create the group and 1 additional person, and 17 oversight individuals from the EO office, the general counsel's office, and the director's office, all of whom told us we did not have the legal right to meet in that room. How's that for where you start? 5 years later, we hosted IC Pride, and we won a National Business Award for our publicity campaign for IC Pride that year. The next year, all of IC Pride, all of the agencies, won the same international award for being a cutting-edge business for inclusivity on LGBT issues in the US in total. So we are living through progress in our own time. But as my mother used to tell me when I was a kid growing up, I didn't know how valuable it would be. If women are the only feminists, we have already failed. How many people were at the luncheon earlier? Show of hands, please. Great. I took a straw poll, stood up and counted. I might never do math in public. But based upon my anecdotal number, I think we had about 90% white people in the audience, and I think the other 10% are in this room right now. We have a diversity problem in the IC. DIA is the most diverse of all of the IC agencies. We beat the rest of the community by 10 percentage points. If you translate that to the business world, I'm not backing up. If you translate that to the business world, that 10 percentage points in richness of diversity is worth 35% greater profits. But since we don't work on a profit model in the IC, we have to think of ourselves as being able to actually produce useful outcomes in either written product or other national security supports that go to a whole of government approach. And so DIA in some cases is considered to be, a model for progress. Let me tell you some things. Management at DIA, to be a supervisor at DIA, the likelihood is that you are 77% male. At DIA, if you're a supervisor, you are 75% white. I'll cut the egg and I'll call it 70, again, I try not to do math in public. 76% of our leaders, of our supervisors, are white men. When they start at GG11 and below, they represent 32% of the population, and by the time they get to senior level, it's 62. White women start at 23, drop to 18, and largely stay static until they get to DISA. Men of color start at 22% and drop to 13. Women of color start at 12% and drop to 7. We have a diversity problem. I was supposed to introduce myself as me, but I didn't. We have a diversity problem. And as long as we're 90% white in a luncheon and 10% people of color, we're going to continue to have a problem. Thanks.
Hopefully this is working. Can you hear me? Yeah. Good afternoon. My name is Rosanna Rogers, and I wanted to start by saying thank you very much for inviting me to participate today. My first appearance at INSS, and I'm very, very excited to be here. I work at the NRO, the National Reconnaissance Office. I'm a contracting officer, so I spend the majority of my time doing acquisitions, but I also spend a great deal of my time leading a group, an ERG, an employee resource group called the NRO Advisory Network, the NRO Hispanic Advisory Network. We normally refer to it as NHAM. And that is the part of my job that I really, really enjoy. I had a situation, I've been with the government for about 12 years now, and I had a situation where I had the opportunity to come work at the NRO, and I've been with the NRO for about almost 4 years. And when I first got to the NRO, someone mentioned the word ERG. And I have never heard that before. I came from DOD. I didn't know what that ERG was. And somebody said, well, you know, I think they have one for Hispanics. You ought to go talk to these people. And so I got myself in front of the senior champion. And to my surprise, I walked out of there, and I loved what I saw. To my surprise, before I left her room, I was on the board. She said, we need people like you. And the reason why I jumped at that is because what I found was a group of ladies that don't only look like me, sound like me, but lo and behold, they talk like me. And they have an accent. And I joined a group in an organization where the things that make us different, the things that make us unique, are celebrated. And that's what I love about my ERG. We celebrate the things that make us unique. We celebrate our challenges, our differences. And so together, we can make a difference. And that's pretty much what I do at work. And when I'm not at work, I'm married to my great husband, Stu, for over 30-some years. And I have 2 wonderful daughters, Alexandra and Francesca, and they're grown. So thank you.
Great. That's wonderful. Well, good afternoon, everybody. How are you? Okay, I'm going to say that one more time. We're going to put a little bit more energy into this breakout session. So good afternoon, everybody. How are you? Yay, see, you just got a free meal. Well, anyway, we say free, but you just got a great meal. How about that, right? And also, we're back together, you know, even though we're definitely doing all the protocols that we need to do, socially distanced, et cetera, but we're back together in person in a conference, which is some sense of normalcy coming back, right? So that in itself should be an applaud, right? We should applaud ourselves. because I'll have to tell you, being the ever so person who, I was very optimistic, but for the long time, Carrie, I was waiting for you to call and say, this is going virtual, so I'm glad we're here. But so for those of you that don't know me, my name is Marlisa Smith. I'm our chief of staff out at the National Security Agency, been at the agency in lots of different jobs, as Carrie mentioned a few of those, but for over, 32 years or so. So really excited to be there. And I'm really pleased to be on the panel. Thank you, Carrie, for moderating this, and glad to join my panelist members here. Glad to see Jackie and Rosanna on the panel as well. So it's really wonderful to be part of the INSS Summit, and not to mention pretty good location, huh, right? Nice location, really pretty outside, and great day. And I'm hoping we'll have a really good, rich dialogue here this afternoon for this hour that we're going to spend together. Really honored to do it because I think this topic that we're going to talk about, diversity, equality, and inclusion, is extremely important. I've been a proud advocate for diversity for many, many years, diversity, equality, and inclusion, especially at NSA for several years. And much earlier in my career, I was the director of our Equal Employment Opportunity and Diversity organization, spent almost 10 years in the organization, and so definitely grown to love a topic that's very near and dear to my heart. And when I was in that role, of course, I helped to really build and maintain a culture of inclusion at the agency, worked really hard with an outstanding team that I had, and also NSA leadership to really ensure that every employee had an opportunity to make a positive impact. And that's what I think Jackie and Ramona were talking about regarding, Rosanna was talking about regarding employee resource groups. So we really got to really focus on that. So it was EEOD at that point when I was running it. It's now been renamed to our Diversity, Equality, and Inclusion, DEI organization. Of course, and we're headquartered not too far from here, of course, in Fort Meade. But our programs really span globally, and that's something that we really focus on. And so for as long as I've been a part of it, we've also been focused on that, making sure that we're collaborating across all of our IC counterparts. So when we're talking today, it's nice that we're talking as an IC panel, because the solutions that we need to focus on are really not just one agency in particular, it's an IC solution, and that's really what we need to do. So similar, I would say, to the co-panelists that I've had here, I'm very passionate about employee resource groups, because I know about a few years ago, we were in the same boat wondering what that was, but I was really fortunate to be on the leadership team when I was leading EEOD at that point to stand up the Employee Resource Group program at NSA. We've done it over 10 years ago, and so now we have 11 employee resource groups. I'm really proud to say, so we have African American, English as a second language, people with disabilities, we have Women Employee Resource Group, Pride, Hispanic, Latino, and Islamic Cultural Employee Resource Group, Next Generation, American Indian, Alaska Native, American Veterans, and we have an Asian American Pacific Islander Employee Resource Group. So really proud to be part of that. As the Chief of Staff now at the agency, I remain connected to the Employee Resource Groups. I just recently finished a term as a Senior Advocate for our Islamic Cultural Employee Resource Group, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. That's something that I'll tell you is where you learn to be comfortable with maybe some things that you're not so familiar with, and that's really important for us to do it. I'm looking forward to the next role as we move forward in our employee resource groups. Each directorate at NSA is responsible for sponsoring a group, and recently our group just was just recognized. We're going to be sponsoring the English as a second language employee resource group, and looking forward to doing that as well. So I'm going to turn it back over to Carrie. Don't want to take up a lot of time because I definitely want us to get into the dialogue and talk about the questions, and glad to answer any that you might have regarding this really important topic.
Super, thanks, Marlisa. So I've got 3 broad categories of questions I'm going to get into here, but please, I don't want to hear my questions. I want to hear your questions. So, as you're sitting here, think about them, write them down, and we'll collect them, and we'll get them asked here. But let me first start with the relationship between the workforce and our employee resource groups and leadership management. How does it really work? If I'm somebody new or I'm somebody within the staff at a very large, 10, 40,000 person organization, how does it work in practice? How does the workforce work with agency leadership and management to affect change? I'm interested in what good looks like. How do you really move the needle, and what were the ingredients to that success? So maybe Jackie, if you'll start us off.
Yeah, so again, I would like to point out that we made a great deal of progress in a very short amount of time at DIA, particularly with regard to LGBTQ inclusion. And I would like to underscore that when I was in uniform, I remember a key leader once told me that successful programs are personality driven. And I think what that means is that if we have a good, strong person at the wheel who's dedicated to creating an inclusive environment, we can make a great deal of headway. The downside of that is that if that person moves on and we have a vacuum of leadership that doesn't really understand the work that goes into a day-to-day environment to create real diversity, we can so easily lose those gains. So one of the most important things that happened in the last 5 years at DIA is we stopped doing things in a silo. We now have what we call the Affinity Group Board, and we regularly meet with each other. I take great pride in telling you that the DIA big chapter, the Blacks in Government chapter at DIA, is the single largest big chapter in the United States government. Let me say that again. DIA has the largest big chapter in the United States government.
Great job. Great.
Now, we do not have the largest workforce in the United States government, so that makes that accomplishment even greater. And I am a proud member of BIG.
Good job.
I say that again.
Yes,
I am a
there you
proud
go.
member of BIG.
Oh, right. There you go. I know that's right.
So I'm going to challenge all of you. I'm jumping the gun. Join an affinity group. Get involved in actually creating diversity in our organizations. Because until we do that, we're not walking the walk, we're just talking. And it's hard to make real change. The second thing I can tell you is that in the wake of May 2020, I was listening to an individual who said, "Don't expect me to do your work for you." So I have spent 18 months leading a group of 25-ish people, educating ourselves on the history of race and gender issues in the United States through film. If anyone would like those materials, we're at 200 titles now that we've watched, so I think we could probably help you. And the second thing is when we create an environment that mostly where we all are with regard to diversity and equity is we are still in a place of compliance. We still address whether or not we're doing the things we're supposed to do by addressing whether or not we've done the least amount of things we're supposed to do. And that's how many of your people have passed their EO class for the year, right? How many people have taken an EO class that's been renewed in the last 8 years? 7 years. Okay, so that's how far behind we are with currency on how we address inclusivity in our workforce. So the number one thing I can advise we do is that we start joining diversity groups that don't look, sound, or feel like our own demography. DIA has been reinforced, and this is not my idea. This is my DIA leadership's idea. And I can only tell you, in the most trite way possible, that this has actually been the most rewarding single thing for me personally in the last decade. I know all kinds of things about other things that I never knew. And I care about them. So DIA is getting better at it. Our agency's getting more reactive to it. But more than that, they're starting to do step-by-step things to improve it. Even in the midst of the pandemic, which made it hard to be together and talk about things and learn from each other. So we need to move from an environment of being compliant to actually inclusive.
Thanks, Jack. I'm going to jump around a bit, and I'm going to direct this towards Marlisa. My next topic, building the pipeline. I had to testify before Congress, before House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence back in 2019 on diversity, equity, and inclusion across the IC. It was a rough hearing, but I'll tell you, it was rough because we went back and we looked at the data, and I think, Jackie, you framed it very well at the outset. I mean, the numbers don't lie. We've got some challenges. And, I was looking, as I was preparing for this panel, in the latest 2020 ODNI, they have an annual demographics report that they put out. And attrition among minorities and women have increased. I mean, we're doing a much better job as a community getting a diverse workforce in the door, but something's happening once they're in the door. So Marlisa, just want to get your thoughts. You've straddled both the, starting your career in the community, working your way up, and now in a senior leadership position. So how are we doing once that talent gets in the door to build the pipeline? And how do we more conscientiously bring equity into that talent development and advancement process, especially among the underrepresented populations in our workforce?
Yeah, so it's a really good question that we really need to talk about, and how we do that as far as what do we do when we get individuals in the door? So once you go out and you do the recruitment, and we're all recruiting, as we talked about earlier, and you heard in the lunch discussions earlier, we are in a race and a hunt for talent. So it's important for us that once we get that talent, and diverse talent at that, we have to make sure that we are keeping them, right? And that those attrition rates continue to be low. We have the percentages, and we watch those, and we also know that, there are things that happen that changes those attrition rates, and some of those out of our control, but a lot is in our control. For instance, we talk about COVID, right, when that happened, right? That was one thing that maybe the attrition rates changed a bit because people looked at things a little bit different post-COVID, even though I say we're still in it, but people were looking at things a little bit different. But even before that, we at our agency, we started looking at this. I almost looked at diversity almost as a cake. I'm using that as an analogy, where you look at it in the layers of the cake. It's very important that we're all focused, right? So really, on one layer, you have individuals, right? And individuals should be doing what they can, each and every person, making sure that they are contributing towards a diverse and inclusive environment. We're going to talk a little bit about inclusivity and belonging, because it's important to recruit and retain a diverse environment. But if you're not including them, and Jackie gave you some figures, right, that really show you that maybe they're not making progress, and that's something that you want to be focused on. Then we always have a mid-level, right, in the middle of the cake, which is kind of those mid-level managers. Those are those individuals that are really usually having day-to-day contact with the individuals in the work environment. That's where we really probably need to really focus quite a bit, because those are the individuals that are going to make or break whether an individual stays with an agency or with an organization. I see a couple of you shaking your heads, right? Because that's true. Those are the individuals that are working with you each and every day. You come to work and you're working with that supervisor. If you enjoy your job, you enjoy your team, you feel respected, you feel that what you're doing is you're making amazing contributions and it's being recognized, you continue to do that. You might not have the competitive salary that you could get somewhere on industry here, especially with us being in the IC, but you'll stay and you'll continue to work and you'll continue to do a good job. But if you feel that you're not getting that, that's one reason when individuals start to speak and walk with they speak with their feet, right, and they leave. So mid-level is really important. And then it's their other level that really is the senior level that makes sure that we are modeling the behavior that we want to trickle down throughout the agency. And that's key for us. And so we've done that in a variety of ways at NSA. Just specifically, I'll talk about that from our senior leaders, me being a DICE, a senior leader. We're expected to model that behavior. We're measured against it in our performance plans. We have that. We have senior leaders that are also sponsors of our employee resource group. As I said, I was a senior advocate. We have some past senior advocates. I see one in the room today. He has his head down, but he was one of our senior advocates as well and worked with me on this program. And it's important for us to have senior advocates and senior leaders that are dedicated and are going to be focused on it, because that's what really helps us to get to Carrie's question, what are we doing? And it's also something that I want to talk about. I want to jump off of one thing really quickly and talk about small steps. Some of you may have heard of this within the ODNI. They have a program called Small Steps. And what that means is it's very small individual things that you can do that make a big impact on an individual, right? So you take those very very small steps, intentional, deliberate steps, meaning you step out of your comfortable zone, as I like to say it, right? And you get comfortable with that. Meaning you take action, you do something that you normally wouldn't do. Maybe individuals are doing that today by coming to this workshop. You have other workshops, other breakouts that you could have attended, but you decided to come to the one on diversity, equality, and inclusion because you know that that's important for you to focus on because it is an important and it is a mission imperative for the agencies. But those small steps, intentional, deliberate, they add up and people see those. They're visible, they make a difference, and people know that you're actually committed to it. Our employee resource groups also aid in helping. That's that bridge between management and the workforce. So in our organization, we've had concrete examples of where our employee resource groups have actually assisted management in addressing issues. For instance, in our Pride ERG, we now have a gender equality policy for transgender employees on the books, policy that we've first in the IC, really excited about having that in the IC. That's one thing that we've done as well. Our Women ERG, another one where we've looked at individuals looking at part-time employment, that's really important, telework, hybrid work, all important for us to be looking at within the IC. Our Islamic cultural group was instrumental in our organization, making sure that we didn't have to utilize the work period, the lunch period. That was huge. Lots of people have benefited from that, especially as you're working through your lunch, you're getting credit for it now. Our Islamic ERG was one of the ones that had really flagged that for us. And then we had an accessibility council that came about because of individuals in our people with disabilities ERG shadowing some of our senior leaders and them actually experiencing firsthand how difficult some of the accessibility issues was. So the list goes on, and so I will tell you that's the value of employee resource groups, and that's how we retain individuals by making sure that we focus on diversity, equality, and inclusion across the IC. So it's going to be really important for us to do that if we want to continue to raise the numbers. If those numbers that Jackie that you quoted just from DIA, if we want those numbers to go up, we're going to have to be really intentional about it.
Great point.
Thanks for the question.
So let me shift. I call this theme tough conversations. How do we create environments, inclusive environments, where we can have honest, tough, candid conversations? And I'm going to take this in two parts. And Roseanne, I'll start with you, but I want the other panelists to weigh in as well. I'll say I remember early in my career being at the receiving end of what I'll politely call here insensitive comments. But I'll tell you, when you're 20-something, you don't know how to respond in the moment. And I didn't know if it was general sexism, ignorance, or just a misunderstanding. And I've had colleagues over the years share similar stories that have happened, whether it's, early, mid, or even later in their careers. So, if you're, let me do this in two parts. One is if you're a person who has experienced something like this, how do we equip that employee with the tools to address those kind of situations? Or, if you're the person who said something, perhaps you've been called out, how do we engage them? And then I want to take this to another direction here is, we tend to pick on the white middle-aged men, but, there are white men that, are often told that they're just part of the problem in the workplace. So what do you suggest to those who truly want to be advocates for change, but that sometimes meet resistance?
I'm very glad that you chose me to answer that question. I had an experience that I would like to share with you today, and I would say it's something that, for me, it changed the path of my career, and it led me to this very stage today. Before I joined the IC world, before I came to the NRO, I was part of another organization, and I have an accent. I grew up overseas. My mother was from Spain, born and raised in Spain. My father is a Mexican-American, and Spanish is my first language. So I've never thought much of the fact that I have an accent until the day I was in front of my supervisor, and she said to me, "Rosanna, you're never going to get anywhere until you learn to speak properly." I kind of looked at her like, "Huh? What is she talking about?" And she said, "You need to learn to speak properly." And then I was thinking, am I saying something wrong? Am I using the wrong tense on the verb? Or, in contracting, we have a lot of different terms. And so she said, you need to learn how to pronounce the contractor's name correctly. It is GDIT. And I went, I've never heard of them. And she said, it's not GDIT. And I said, oh, it sure is. No, it's not GDIT, it's GDIT. And then she looked at me and said, say it. And I looked at her and I said, what? And she said, say it. So I stood there and I went, GDIT? And she said, say it again. GDIT? Again. GDIT? She goes, don't forget. I can't tell you how I felt at that moment. And I will tell you what I did next, but few of you may or may not have done the same thing. I went to my car and cried. I cried and I was like, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. I was so belittled. I was so embarrassed, but I was like, okay, you're a professional, clean up your makeup, you get yourself together, you go back in there. And then of course I ran into my teammates. They could tell I was upset. They could tell I was being crying. Hey, Rosina, what's wrong? And I said, you won't believe what just happened. And I shared my experience with them. And what happened next is what floored me. He looked at me in the eye and said, oh yeah, we all make fun of the way you talk. I was floored. I was like, here I am looking for sympathy, and they're telling me they all make fun of my accent. And I cannot tell you how I felt at that moment. I went from being upset to being furious. I went from being sad to being just mad. And I said one or two choice words to him, and I walked out, right? So I get myself together, and I'm like, this can't be happening. This is not the 1960s. This is not the 1970s. So then I decided, I need a mentor. I need someone that I can go talk to. And I looked around my office, and what did I see? I couldn't find a single Latino. I couldn't find a single Hispanic. I couldn't find anyone in that org chart that it could relate to what had just happened to me. I thought, this must be a mistake. I walked around that office. I looked in the org charts. I was looking for somebody to help me. And there was no one there. And at that moment, I felt so alone. I felt so isolated. And I also felt beaten. And that's when I realized this may not be the right place for me. Luckily, not too long after that, I got a call from the NRO, and I joined the NRO. And I think I told you, I went and somebody said, hey, go join that. There's a group over there. And like I said, they talk like me, they sound like me, they speak like me. But that's the importance of ERGs. To me, what we do for each other is critical. I no longer feel alone. I no longer feel isolated. I no longer feel singled out. I feel appreciated, and I feel I'm very, very fortunate to work at the NRO where my differences are appreciated. At the NRO, we have 7 ERGs. We're all very, very active ERGs, and I'd like to take a moment to tell you how we, the ERGs, make a difference for the workforce. Not just necessarily for our particular ERG, but for the entire workforce. Not too long ago, because due to COVID, we had an offsite that ended up being on-site with our director, Dr. Scalisi, and this is an opportunity that he took to listen to all the ERGs and to say, how can I help you, what can I do? And so one of the things that we wanted was help us on your weekly announcements to the workforce, put a little blurb about our activities. What are we doing? What happens to be going on? And it just so happened that last year, during the Hispanic Heritage Month that starts in the month of September, we sent him a little paragraph. We sent it to his office, and we worked it up the chain, and now it's included in the Director Weekly. He did that first for our Hispanic Heritage Group. It is an activity that now happens. Every time one of the ERGs has an activity, it is included in his message to the workforce. Nice. Another great thing that came out of the offsite, the NRO cadre workforce is a newer cadre, it's a newer workforce. So the environment at the NRO, we have a DoD element, we have an agency element, and we have the cadre workforce. With the cadre workforce, we did not have a performance objective for diversity and inclusion, and we felt that was something very important, not only to reflect all the hard work of the men and women that participate in the ERGs, but also to challenge the people and to invite folks to say, hey, come join us. And like Jackie said, you don't have to be Hispanic to join NHAM. You don't have to be African American to join BIG. But having this now performance objective is definitely an invitation and a bit of a challenge to say, hey, come join us. And don't just join the group, be active in the group. One of the other great things that came out of the summit was during the time of COVID, there was a lot of challenges for the workforce, especially for the women in the workforce, for the moms, that due to the school, what was going on with the schools, there was no childcare available, school was virtual. They needed a lot of flexibility. So they asked for that. They asked for that directly to the director and said, when you change our work schedules, we need more than a week notice. We can't just turn around and go find a babysitter. And guess what? It's usually up to the moms to stay home. And that's affecting us. So we need lots of flexibility. And that is happening because the ERGs asked the director. So now everyone is given a maximum flexibility. We have what we call MaxiFlex, and MaxiFlex is now utilized for everyone in the workforce. So that's how we can make a change. That's how an ERG makes a change. Now, the ERGs do talk to each other. We have, through our E&I group, they have a council. We get together once a month, and we share the activities, and we bounce ideas of each other, and we grow from each other. Also, I tell you that the NRO Corporate Council, they invite the ERGs to come and speak to them on a monthly basis. And they have chosen once a month, on the first Friday of the month, for the ERGs to come and share and say, what do you need from us? How can we help you? What's going on? I find those very rewarding. I find that my avenue as a worker bee, as I like to say, as a peon, to get my voice heard by management. And that's what I like about the ERGs.
I want to see if the others had thoughts on that question.
I actually do,
Okay.
if you don't mind my hurrying up and going. It's important and nice that we always go back to remembering what we do this for. This is about mission, right? Diversity and inclusion actually strengthen our capabilities, right? If all we have in the room are one demographic, it's unlikely that we're going to be able to do a subtle, in-depth assessment of a wide variety of people's cultures and backgrounds. So this is at its core about mission. And for example, right now Congress is a little bit interested in the IC and its demographic components, right? And what we look like. Now, yes, I just told you that DIA is 10 percentage points higher on the rest of the IC with regard to their diversity, peoples of color. But at the risk of saying this in the middle of a video conference, it's a little class stratified. Most of our people of color work in mission support. They don't work in our core enterprises. Human, 7%, both male and female, only 7% are people of color in human. It's better in analysis, but only more than marginally, but it's not where it should be, and that's 25%. When you get to GS-15, there are only 7 African-American GS-15s in the analysis career field at DIA, right? And that next step of what they were saying, how do we do that? What are those tough conversations? Here's my strategy for you. If you're in the intelligence community, you sit and think and plan all the time of, if this happens, then what? How many of you sat down and have planned out conversations when people say the wrong thing in your presence? It's important to do, right? On more than one occasion, not surprisingly by my haircut, I get called sir, to which I turn around and the back looks different than the front. So there's usually a look of surprise. And my constant strategy is always to gender switch the person in front of me. And then I laugh and say, oh, I just thought that's what we were doing today. If I don't ever call them on it, they can't ever change it. If I don't ever make it personal, it doesn't really mean anything. So plan your comebacks. Don't wait till 30 seconds later and go, I should have said, have them ready. And do it with humor and kindness, because almost always it isn't intentional. When it is, we will know. But be prepared. Being prepared is what intelligence is about, so let's be prepared about how we do that. And put pronouns in your signature block. It lets people know that you're aware of the wider scope around you. And I would like to acknowledge the fact that we are sitting on the land of the Powhatan people. That's it from me.
Thank you, Jackie.
Right, thank you. Okay.
Oh, I didn't know. You
Oh,
wanted
go
to
ahead,
ask
please,
a
go ahead.
question? No, go ahead. We'll take one of the questions from the audience.
Okay.
And I saw you getting all those index cards.
Well, these are all leadership questions, so I'm going right
Oh, yeah,
to
right.
Now, what actions have you seen leadership take that were most effective at increasing diversity and or inclusion? But also then for our ERG representatives here, these leaders have a lot on their plate. They're managing, mission operations, the broader workforce. So on what issues do you feel heard by your leadership? And then maybe issues that you don't as much, and kind of what do you draw from that?
So I'll take the first leadership question, and I'll tell you, this may sound really simple, but because it is, it's something very simple, but it yields such great results. So one action that we've taken as leaders is to advertise our positions. So if you think about that speaks volumes, and you say, well, that's what we do. No, that's not all the time what we do. What we do is we end up getting a task that's assigned to us very quickly, and immediately in your head, I do it too. I say, oh my goodness, yes, I know I can take this task because I know Ann is my go-to person, and she is going to be able to pull this off, be able to write that up, and we will definitely get it done because I know I've worked with her before. She's my go-to. She can do it. But am I missing somebody? Is there somebody else in the organization that I never give an opportunity to because I automatically do that? And as a matter of fact, is there somebody that may be even more qualified? So by advertising, at least that broadens your applicant pool, and you would be surprised, you begin to see individuals that may not come in front of you, and you're like, this individual is well qualified to do this, and actually you try to make sure that when you do that advertisement that you get really diverse applicants. So it's something very simple, very simplistic, but it's something that works, and it's yielded us some great results by making sure that we mandate that the majority of our jobs, because you always have exceptions, right? I'm not going to kid you and say that that's not the case, but the majority of our jobs now are advertised, and so that gives individuals the opportunity to apply and put their name in the hat and be considered, and we've had some really great people work some outstanding projects that, as we talked about, benefits the mission, because this is all about mission. It's all about making the mission better. So thank you for that question. Great question.
Yeah, great. The IC is in a war for talent. So how do we attract talent, especially in technology fields where the private sector is more lucrative and inclusive? And then are there any models in the private sector that the IC has leveraged as gold standards?
I'm sorry, did someone infer that the tech industry is more inclusive?
More lucrative, lucrative and inclusive, yes.
I'm just going to contest that. I don't think it is more lucrative, but I don't think it's more inclusive. If you've read a study that says otherwise, please share it with me, because everything I've ever read, the IC is probably more inclusive than the tech world. Right? I'm sorry.
No, that's good. Other thoughts?
Great. The first part of your question was what can the IC do to retain?
We're in a war for talent, yeah.
More of a talent. That is a challenge. That is not a challenge that's unique to the IC. It's also a challenge to DoD. Let's be honest, we are competing with the big IT companies out there, right? We want to attract some of the best. Let's an example. Let's take an engineer. It's going to be very tough for the IC community to try to compete with the Googles and Amazons and Microsofts, right? We can't come close to their salaries, and we can't come close to all the new toys that they have, right? I mean, you're talking about kids that are just out of college. Now, I would tell you, I have 2 daughters, and they're in they're the millennials. They're in their 20s, and what it's important to them, I can guarantee you, it's not what's important to us when we started our careers. So how do we say to them, hey, come work for the IC? Well, I will tell you, in my opinion, it's something that I try to be very vocal about. We need to change. We need to change our recruiting strategies. We need to change and increase our salaries. We need to change the opportunities that we're seeing out there. We cannot continue doing the same things that the government has been doing, IC or DoD, and expect them to work. I will tell you, when my daughters had their first cell phone, and they learned how to text, and guess who was paying the bill? Mommy was paying the bill, and I would call them, and I would say, I just wanted to check in, see if they made it home from school okay, see how their day was, I would call them, and they wouldn't answer the phone, and when they did, my daughter put me on hold, and I was like, we get home, and I said, excuse me, I'm paying the bill. Next time Mommy calls, you don't put Mommy on hold. So next day, I called her again, from work. I wanted to make sure that she was doing okay. And I called. Did she put me on hold? No. She sent me to voicemail. So I'm like, okay, we're going to have a conversation when I get home. And so I told her, I asked her, I said, okay, so what do you want your cell phone for? If not to talk to Mom, and Mom's got you a cell phone because I want to make sure that you're okay, right? And she said, well, I mainly want it for texting, not calling, texting. I went, oh, okay. So I got myself a brand new shiny iPhone, just like the one she had, and all of a sudden I'm texting. So guess what? Next day, or a couple days after I got my phone, I texted her, and I said, hey, did you make it home from school okay? I got an answer like that. That's what we need to do. We need to change. We need to change our back office products. Some of our technology is not very appealing. Is not what they want. So if we want to attract, we want to recruit, and we want to grow that talent, we need to change. We cannot expect for them to adjust to us. Sorry.
Good job.
Okay, I've got enough time for one more. I'm going to kind of call this a lightning round, but this was very much focused more tactically and at the grassroots level. I really liked Marlise's phrasing earlier of just taking small steps. So for all of us sitting here today, regardless of your background, experience, et cetera, what one step, what small step can each of us here today take to take a more active participatory role in all of the issues that we've been discussing today? What's that one small step that you would recommend?
Yeah, so I would tell you that program, that's an OD&I program, Small Steps. I think it's a wonderful program because it really doesn't require you to do much. And if you think about if everybody does that, right, it will be a huge impact upon it. So I would tell you, just a small step that we made as far as advertising jobs. But I would tell you when you have that next thought about an assignment or a team, think about somebody that you normally wouldn't think about putting on that team. Take a chance. Take a chance and let me know. Send me an email. Just a really small step, broadens horizons, gives an individual exposure. It really helps your team too because you're getting a whole different, diverse perspective. So just a small step, something that you can do.
Rosanna, your small step.
My small step is a little different, and I would like to challenge all of you in the room who have the opportunity to become a mentor. If you have a mentor, if an employee, okay, let's go back to that situation that I had where I was all alone. If I had had someone that I could talk to, someone that I could have gone to, someone that could have guided me, I would probably still be there. But I didn't have that person. So please, if you're in a position where you can become a mentor and you see potential in someone, and they might just need someone to talk to, someone to the government's not an easy place to navigate. So become a mentor. And if you are in a position where you need a mentor, go seek one out. It takes time, it takes a commitment, but the rewards are phenomenal. That would be my challenge to you, mentorship.
Jackie, your small step.
Mine kind of reflects the question that you indicated you might ask us, how are we being heard and how not? And the how heard would, I think that they're hearing us that there's a problem. I don't think that they're hearing us that things have to be done to solve the problem. And so my requirement would be to put in everyone's objectives for the year to belong to an affinity group. But since that's a little bit grand, that's not exactly a small step, because I think I'll have a fight when I go back to DIA and recommend that. So I actually mentioned this to Carrie the second I walked in, and I said, the problem is what I just saw in the lunchroom. It's like I'm in high school. The problem's in the lunchroom. And that's that next year at INSA, every single one of us ought to have to bring a member of an affinity group with us.
No, this has been a really impactful discussion for me, so thank you all.
What's your small step, Carrie? You can't get out of here without sharing.
Oh,
it.
you're putting me on the spot. I'm gonna build off of what you said, Marlisa. And we had a chance to talk a little bit before this panel, and what I loved, I'm gonna single you out here, is you could have chosen an African-American ERG to mentor, to participate in, but you made the deliberate decision to pick some folks that don't look like you or have the same background as you, and to really push and challenge yourself to learn. And I love that. I'll tell you, the first member of Congress I worked for, Southern gentleman that, you'd think the stereotypes would be there, but I remember he used to say, gosh, if everyone's saying yes, then no one's thinking. Surround yourself by people that are going to give you different perspectives. You may end up at a decision, you're not going to get everybody to agree, but that's fine. Hear them out, really think critically so that you're making the most informed decision possible. And that has stuck with me throughout my entire career, in the Hill, in the Pentagon, now in the private sector, but just, surround yourself, be open to being challenged, and I think it'll make you better, and it'll make the mission or the outcome, the decision, better as well. So, again, everyone here today, find that small step, take it, and I really liked the comment earlier here too, is, let's build those organizations where our differences, our uniqueness, our broad perspectives are really celebrated. So again, on that I'll end and say thank you, everybody. Thank you, panelists. Marlisa,
You're welcome.
Rosanna, Jackie, it's been a tremendous discussion. Thank you.